And ladies and gentlemen, welcome on your screen at the right time on the CRMKonvos show. Join us and be with us for a fantastic, fabulous hour with Dr. Natalie Petouhoff. Hello, Natalie. It's so good to have you back with us, as we had the opportunity several times already to have some communication with you and conversations on our topic of today as well, which is empathy. Empathy in business. Surprise, yeah. The status of empathy and its advantages in the business world is something which is really fascinating in the way of that we are looking forward in this conversation today, what kind of developments have been happened. Before we start in our conversation, I would love to introduce you, for those which have not had the opportunity either to read your book, which is a must read, and to be very honest, that I give this book always to people I do care about as a little teaser and an encouragement that empathy is something which is a part of day-to-day business life, as well as not only in taking care of ourselves. Natalie believes in aligning technology with human values, advocating for empathy as a strategic business asset. Her work with the Dalai Lama and her leadership in woman-generative AI reflect her commitment to inclusive innovation and ethical AI development. And that is the fantastic move which one can see as you started formally in globally recognized roles as customer experience and employee experience and strategy expert with a career spanning leadership roles in consulting, research, enterprise technology. You have served in several roles as advisor, principal analyst, CXVP for a large vendor, guess who, analyst consultant, and adjunct professor of USC and Singularity University. Having said that, it is my absolutely pleasure that you are please adding what I left or missed. And else, I would love to start. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm here in Arizona. I still live in Los Angeles, but here visiting my sister. So a little bit different setting than you saw me in last.
Yeah. But it is an interesting setting, and sound quality is fantastic. And we are eager to exchange some ideas. So you have been the last row when we have met. You were in a consulting role with an AI company, which has had the combination of artificial intelligence and some robotics. And now you had then a very interesting part where I only could read through social media on that you have been to India for several trips, and you did meet his, I don't know if it's his holiness, like the Pope, or the spiritual leader of a very peaceful movement, the Dalai Lama. And having seen what you wrote in all these fantastic posts, I was extremely curious where there is one of the pictures where you are sitting on a cushion in front of a large hall and audience. So I was curious, what is the current status of empathy in corporate cultures globally from your perspective right now?
Well,
I
don't even know where to start. It's fascinating. I mean, you know that we came out with that book in 2022, and a lot of people misunderstood what it was about. And so, and I'm still explaining it and happy to explain it again. I think people meet me and they go, "Oh yeah, you're that nice lady that wrote that orange book." And I'm like, "I am a nice lady, and I did write a book that's orange in color." And then they're like, "Well, like, that's so nice." And I'm like, "Yeah, empathy appears to be this, like, soft, touchy-feely, nice thing to do." And you had asked me when we were in our green room getting ready, "Is there book 2?" And so book 2 is gonna be called The Economics of Empathy,
Ah,
because I'm just gonna lay out the math, right? Because it's interesting because I'm wired this way, and I've been this way since I started my career, and it always made sense to me, right? Like, the more as a leader or running a company, and it's not just about call centers, it's any kind of company, if you're really good to your employees, then and they feel seen and heard and acknowledged, then they're not gonna quiet quit, which means that, let's say, for every dollar you're paying them, you're gonna at least get a dollar back or more, right? They're gonna
mhm,
be innovative, they're gonna be motivated, they're gonna show up, they're gonna do their action items on time, um, and motivate each other. And so for, like, all the people who are, like, leaders who are worried about, like, I'm paying all these people and, like, what are they actually doing in the current climate of people, quiet quitting, it totally makes sense. And then the other piece of a business, like, there's 2 parts, right? There's the employees who do the stuff to make the business happen, and then there's people who buy your stuff. And if you don't have people buying your stuff, then you don't have a company because there's no revenue. And so the more that you're focused on what customers need and want, the more likely are that they're gonna buy your things. And so to me, the economics of empathy is you're paying people to do a job, you want them to really do a great job, and
yeah.
then you want customers to buy your stuff because otherwise I don't know why we're in business. And so that's really kind of the nutshell, and I find it really fascinating that we're still not completely understanding this,
Yeah.
but, um, I guess that keeps me employed.
And at least you can be very proud of that. You set up a scenario where you were recognized as a female who has something to tell about. You have that orange book, you had a starting point created. You then gave them the perspective that the combination of employee experience and customer experience in combination with artificial intelligence as another interesting kick of the side of where benefits can be developed and delivered. Um, Having seen a lot of cultures, where do you see some of the differentiators? Because you have been not only to India, but in your consulting approaches, you have been with several organizations which have read the book, and this was the C level, and they said, I have to get that charming lady here to my company and make it happen. I want it delivered. I want it exercised. I want it to become alive. Can you share some of these moments with us, please?
Yeah, so that's been really fascinating is so I'm an applied AI, uh, engineer scientist, and so to me, technology applied to solve a problem is
Hmm.
the best way, right? Because since the first industrial revolution, we've been using technology to help humans do things that either we didn't want to do or we didn't have the physical strength or if the machine did it faster. And so with the advent of AI, what's really fascinating is, with every technology revolution, so and I've been through many of them, ERP, CRM, cloud, social, digital, and now AI. The thing about AI is that if you do it wrong, you would do the wrong things faster.
Oopsie.
Yes. So I'll give you like a little scenario of a company that we have just completed about a 2-year cycle, and they started right at the very beginning. And so they brought me on because they were like, now we need strategy, right? And I was like, okay, these are my people. Because it's not about this, like, because some people are like, what technology should I buy? And I'm like, okay, well, what are you trying to do? And like, but which app? And so it's not about the app or the technology. It's about what is it that you want to do first. And then we can pick apps and configure and all that good stuff. So what they did was we had a policy of no layoffs for a year.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at, the first thing we did was we looked at the employee experience. So the day in the life of an employee. And we said, what are the things that each employee does? And we had people map out, here's what my day looks like. And then we had to identify, here's the stuff that I don't really like doing, or it'd be so great if somebody could do this spreadsheet, or someone could like do my PowerPoints, or like all these things that were taking up a lot of time. So we mapped all that out. And then we also looked at process. And oftentimes in a company, we're doing things and the process doesn't really make sense. So before we even applied any new technology, we started to look at what's the workflow and what is that. So we fixed those things. And then we said, okay, now let's look at AI for HR, AI for the contact center, AI for procurement, AI for manufacturing. So wherever it was in the company, and we were very specific. And we also looked at, I've been working with this company called Cosmos, and they look at all of the AI that you're using and determine how many different AIs do you have open, Anthropic, like all, right? And are you using the right AI for whatever job you're trying to get done, and help you configure that so that you have one central location where everything is coming through. So it's a very fascinating model to look at and to really configure everything that you're doing. And then we said, okay, so, and a lot of our listeners are call centers, so we started looking at the call center, and key things are, what is the employee experience? What's the agent experience, right? So if self-service doesn't really work, then the agent gets all those questions. So let's look at what's happening with the agent. So we started with the agent, the employee first, looked at where we could apply that, and then we started applying it. So what was really fascinating was because we were automating things that the technology was really suited for, and we weren't just like kind of trying to bolt it in. What we found was that most employees saved between 15 to 50% in their workflow. And so there's always this knee-jerk reaction of management to say, well, that's super cool. Now I can get rid of headcount, right?
Wow.
That whole efficiency, productivity conversation. And I said, well, wait a minute. Okay, so we committed to no layoffs. So I said, okay, now let's look at all the products and the processes and the things that you wanted to innovate that you've never had time to get to before. Why don't we take people and reconfigure them a little bit?
Yeah.
Why don't we take a look? And so what they did was, instead of laying people off, they said, okay, because our people are more efficient at doing the things they're already doing, let's do those special projects. Let's create those products, those services. Let's really like make this completely outstanding. And so what's really fascinating to me is that now they're about a year and a half ahead of their competitors, because not only did they cut the fat out of their business, right?
Yeah.
Now they've strategically placed the AI so that the AI can do the stuff that nobody wanted to do or doesn't make sense anymore. And now they've given the employees the freedom and the possibility of doing things that are more in alignment with themselves, right? The things that they were like always aching to do but couldn't do. And now that's given them a tremendous competitive advantage. So I think this is a super great model, right? To say, and so, right, all of this sounds like everything that we know: customer journey mapping, employee journey mapping. The empathy step, is looking at things from the employee's point of view and the customer's point of view, actually taking the time to sit in their seat and understand it from their point of view. And when you do, you're like, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because the employees are saying this to each other, like, this is really stupid. And so like actually having leaders and managers knowing this, and then having the go ahead to just like, okay, let's get rid of these things that are completely nonsensical. And that's really what empathy is about, is really truly being customer centric. And then one of the cool things that we've been doing is I've been working with this company called Feedback, and they're like in-app, so in-channel, real-time customer feedback. And one of the things that I've been doing is helping companies look at their AI bots. So there's a whole bunch of disappointment with bots and disappointment with AI. And it's like, well, what if you could ask your customers how they feel about what you've deployed, or maybe ask them what they'd like before you even go to deploy it? So there's a planning, there's an optimizing, and then there's a monetizing aspect. And so generally voice of the customer is kind of like an afterthought, and it's like, okay, we need to know, right? Because we're going to measure CSAT. We need some tool to do this. And what I love about this, the way that this is executed, this feedback product is executed, it's in the channel that you're already in. It's real time. You're not getting like an email survey like a day later, and you don't click on it, right? Because it doesn't feel like an in-app experience. And so what we're doing is, before we were just asking for general feedback on stuff, right? But then we were like, well, let's ask some questions very specific to AI. So depending on where the company was, like, did you trust the bot? Did you trust the bot's answer? Like, and all that kind of stuff. So now we're using voice of the customer to truly understand your AI implementation. And that, again, right? This is like, I know it's really hard for people to understand the word empathy, but empathy just means like really be customer and employee centric.
And talk about feelings, talk about emotions, make them visible, not only the tip of the iceberg, but a little more, so that you can reassure yourself that you see the challenge, the risk. If you would be a ship, Titanic, never forget it. Yeah. And
Oops.
Speed is not always. So the efficiency moloch is for me a detour. It's not always the straight way forward to be very efficient and fast. The combination, the smartness, the magic triangle, 5,000 horsepowers, but a light from your brain rising. Yeah. So that is the magic triangle. Get the speed on the street, but with the right enablement. I would love to know, by getting the buzzword enablement, or how to enable people in these organizations, especially the last one you were talking about right now, where they have chosen not to lay off people, but to keep them, and to make a process redesign, analyze properly, get customer feedback. Have they been trained on their AI tools?
So that is part of it. So it's interesting, right? So it's interesting because anytime you give adults a new tool,
Mm-hmm.
can't just expect that they're going to know how to use it. And so one of the things that I did with HR, so it was really fascinating. I worked with each of the functional departments, like the CHRO, the head of IT, the CTO, the CIO, the CEO. And so we got to work with the heads of all of the different departments. And so in HR, we looked at roles, responsibilities, and skills.
Yeah.
So part of it was what is that person expected to do?
Mm.
And what tools have we given them currently? And then what if we used AI, how would that change their role? How would that change, like, and we had to go through job description changes, And then we had to look at performance management, right? What are the expectations? What can we do? And part of it was really looking at, becoming a learning organization and making it fun and exciting. And a lot of people had been playing with Chat GPT
Yeah.
or, some Claude or Perplexity or Grok. And so people had been playing with it in their personal life, and they kind of were using it at work, but they really weren't sure how to do that. And so part of it was like everybody had their own instance, right? So now you have people putting in stuff into these public websites that is company specific, which is not a good idea because now you're giving your stuff to everybody. And so there's like that private instance. There was also working with Cosmos to look at, are we really efficiently? Because some of the hidden costs, right, are how much are we paying? Every time you put stuff in and it does crunching, it's pinging stuff and that all costs money. So are we being efficient about the AI that we're using, right? So having that kind of dashboard, and then really looking at training people so that they got really good at using it very specifically for their workflow. And what HR does, obviously, is different than the call center, is different than procurement, is different than manufacturing. So really looking at reskilling, upskilling, and giving people a choice. And, I'll be honest, not everybody was interested. And I think some of that was intimidation. Some of that was like, I don't think I'm smart enough. Dr. Nat, you're a rocket scientist. Everything comes easy. I'm like, no, that's not true. Like it's, I call it butt glue. And sometimes you just have to sit down and go, okay, step by step. Okay, I'm going to do this. What is prompt engineering? The better you write the prompt, it's kind of like when you do like, I don't know, a search in a search engine, the better you write the question, the better answer you're going to get. And so just teaching people prompt engineering and then teaching, okay, now that we have that, how do we fit that into the workflow? And some of it's habit. Like we wake up, we look at our cell phone, we look at all our messages, we open email on our laptop or our phone. And so part of it was, okay, when I wake up, how am I going to integrate AI into my workflow, into what I do? And so I worked very, very closely with the CHRO and the heads of HR and training to figure out how are we going to help the humans learn this stuff. And without that, we'd be guessing whether people were really using it properly. And again, I don't know why a company would run themselves that way. Like, why would you not really know what your employees are doing? And why would you not help them do it better, faster, more fun?
I would love to share the perspective of what you talked about, the job to be done perspective, where Michael Boysen was in our show, and the beneficial utilization of dedicated tools for a dedicated job, what we had in discussions with Nicole France, who is now owner of a coffee shop. And without a large team, she had now some AI to team up with and to do dedicated jobs. Or Christy Tupper, which is consulting folks on utilizing the right tools for the right job and even neglect some stuff. And be aware, if you don't pay the tool, you pay the tool with your knowledge or with some of the brainware you are putting inside. So be aware of this, especially if you're in the Americas. Dr. Graham, Dr. G, as Michael, a former strategist analyst and knowledgeable chap who was going for the movement and how AI is developing in several, let's say, layers, and all comes back to the aspect, if you do not learn to use your tool, you stay a fool.
I'm going to steal that one. That's fantastic. Yeah. It's
the thing is,
you have to you kind of have to get on the bike. You can't learn to ride a bike from reading a book, right? There's a visceral experience of it. And until and I think the smartest thing that OpenAI did was to create a chat window, right? So that we could go in and we could type something in and we could see it do its little thinking thing, and it would come back with stuff so quickly and for the most part brilliantly. And so that, I think, for people who don't program, who are not data scientists, who are not developers, I don't know that the world really understood the fantastic nature of large language models,
Yeah.
or even the reasoning models, which gives it the agentic decision-making capabilities. But because we all got to play with it, that opened our eyes, right? And that gave us motivation and curiosity. But I think that's where, so I work a lot. I consult with brands and executives, but I also work with a lot of the vendors. And the vendors are frustrated because the buying cycle, they call it the AI winter. And it makes sense. I can see it, right? Because so when Sam Altman and everybody was like, oh, you got to hurry up and you got to deploy something and we're going to lay off all the people and you're going to cut your costs, right? So then everybody was like, oh my gosh, we have to do something. And boards were pushing and executives were pushing. So everybody did something, right? And it was like the best decision they could make at the time. And then now they looked back on it and they went, what did we do? Right? And like behind the closed doors, do we get the results we wanted? Calls didn't go down, right? And so now people aren't buying like they thought that they would. And in part because and because I've been through the cycle so many times, whether it's ERP and CRM or cloud or social or digital, you're basically automating workflow, right? And you're automating a customer journey. Customer is going to look at your stuff. So there's advertising and there's marketing, and you're going to take them through the funnel. Those are all steps, right? And so we really want to take the AI and help those steps and help the humans. And so to me, we're making the same mistakes that we've made for the past, I don't know how many years that we've been in this technology, at least the last couple of the fourth and fifth industrial revolution. And so for companies who are disappointed, it's probably because you didn't know what to do and you didn't really have an AI strategy or an AI strategist.
Right.
And I think also there's vendors often create a tool in search of a problem. And instead, what I would recommend to vendors and the AI vendors that I work really closely with, I'm like, okay, what does your AI do? Is it generative? Is it agentic? What does it do? Okay, here's the places, because I'm listening, right, from the buyer's point of view. Here's what they're struggling with, and here's what they really want it to do. How can we take what you're doing and either get the tool to do that, if it doesn't, or sometimes it's just reworking your marketing so that people can see, oh, it does that, right, very specifically. And so some of it is in the messaging and the unique selling proposition. Exactly. And so I think, we're just, in order to get out of that. And then the other thing, I was working with a really big vendor, and I think that the idea of their technology, because it's integrated into their CRM, and it's like, because they have their tentacles into so many different departments and functional areas in a company, it makes so much sense. And from their point of view, it's easy to use. I built an agent on their platform. It was not easy. I'm a pretty smart cookie. I would, and I don't know that, I think this is one of the reasons that they're having an AI winter. And so part of it is, again, it goes back to user experience.
Yep.
It goes back to humans. It goes back to how it feels when we use the tool, and if it's clunky or complicated or confusing. And think about, like, if you have 2 people in a company, so then you have to train 2 people. If you have 300 people in a company, it's 300 people that have to learn this. If you have 100,000 people, oops, it's a lot. right? And so if vendors, if you're out there listening, go and ask your customers for truthful feedback about how easy this is,
Yeah.
right? And ask people who aren't admins, right? Because an admin can configure this stuff. Like they'll like read the technical manual and they'll ask their friends and they'll figure it out. But ask someone who is more like me, who's technical but not an admin or an SE, how is it to use it? Right. And compared, and we have this expectation because we've all played with the, large language models, like in a browser format or a mobile format. How does it compare to that experience?
Yeah.
And if it's not that easy or that much fun, then there's going to be like a nah or a meh or
Mm-hmm.
oh, wait. And then I think the other piece is what are we measuring? Are we measuring anything? Like, do we know what was happening before we started in our businesses? And if you had done the workflow, right, and you've done the customer journey mapping and the employee journey mapping, and we said, okay, here's how long it takes to somebody to build a PowerPoint. Here's how long it takes to do this kind of spreadsheet. Here's how long it takes to make this widget. If we knew that, and then we did time motion studies or whatever those, however you want to measure, or other KPIs and metrics, then we take the fat out, right? Just by making the process or the tools better. Then we add AI. It should be, right? I'm putting that in big quotes. It should be better. And in fact, with the exponential capabilities of
Yeah.
AI, it should be way better. So did we set up measurements to begin with?
Ha! And the another thing is most of the people forgot this little one, yeah, such as we haven't done it. We have not thought before we acted. That is what I would like to emphasize. Think before you act and rethink again. It saves you money, time, and frustration. And to get people to love their tool, if you educate them, you will get a lot more out of the whole experience because they will never ever want to give it away. Yeah.
Mm.
Because they get addicted in a positive
Oh,
way. Yeah.
it's fun. I mean, we're addicted to our phones. Why? Because it's easy and it's fun and like, right? So what if your employees were that excited about the apps they open up on their laptops?
Yeah. And they just look forward to jump out of their beds and go to work and go into action. Yeah.
Yes.
And be empathetic in that area, such as live and show empathy in the action of their work and share it with other people. How does empathy influence customer loyalty and retention? Because we were jumping into KPIs and having vague knowledge of customer experience is measured by surveys and all that stuff. Can empathy be measured as a business KPI? Two questions
So,
in one sentence.
yes and yes.
Cool.
That's my
So,
answer.
next question. How do we do it smartly, Natalie?
So, first of all, we need to define what empathy is in an organization, right? And to me, empathy just means being customer and employee centric.
Yeah.
So, how do you normally measure that? I don't know that the metrics actually change.
Mm-hmm.
CSAT, MPS, average handle time, average after work call time, all these things. I don't know that our metrics necessarily change
Mm-hmm.
because that's how we've set up businesses. I think that part of what we're not measuring is the time it takes to do things. And so time could be a really interesting metric. So, how much time did we save? Um, is it cognitively less wearing on a human? And so you may not, for things like that. So I think there's like the hard, like black and white. It used to take me an hour and a half to do a PowerPoint. I put it into Gamma or whatever, and I get like a basic, a really good start. So now I've cut that hour and a half down into 30 minutes, and now I just have to like tweak it. So there's time, right? And then I think there's on a Rickert scale, ease, complexity. Did I have time to do the other things that are on my to-do list that I didn't get to do? What are those? And so really looking at what are we measuring? And I think there's a lot of things on P&Ls that should be there that we're not measuring. And so really looking at structuring, restructuring how we measure and what we measure. And then I think some of it is a lot of these kind of surveys end up being done at the beginning of the year, which I think is a horrible time to do them because everybody had to come back from work from the holidays.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's like the employee, I don't know, performance survey or something. So I think if we are able to get feedback in a different way, right? And if we're able to get in-app feedback, then maybe that gives the company a read on things in a more real time. Like, so in this app feedback that I'm working with in the channel, right? Because it's in channel, you can see very specifically, like for coaching agents, you can go to the very specific part of the conversation, see where there was friction, and then be able to give the agent coaching. And so part of that is, how are we setting up the AI? Are we really using voice of the customer and voice of the employee to figure out whether the AI is really working or not? And then always when you're doing measurement is there's like measuring it. And then there's like, okay, now we know what's not working. So now do we go back and do we redo things?
Okay.
Are we retooling? Are we changing anything? Because it's nice to know, our CSAT fell. So why? And then, is it because the handle fell off the suitcases that we're manufacturing? Or is it because the handles fell off and everybody's calling? And so now our call volume went crazy? Like the why behind what's happening in our businesses. And so I think part of it really is truly understanding and asking those questions, and then taking that feedback and going back to product, going back to manufacturing, going back to billing, like maybe some of the back office, going back to marketing and saying, we're saying this in marketing, but when we actually go to sell it, that's not really the offer that we're making. Right. And so making sure that whatever is happening in the sales and marketing, the product delivery, and then the product service, that we're actually being consistent and authentic in all the things that we're doing. And then it's almost like in the one company that I was working with that really, really got this, there was a committee, and we had someone from every single department on that AI committee. And so when we measured, and when we got the feedback, the call center could say, well, we have this gigantic spike because this is happening. And we're really the eyes and ears to what's happening in the company, to our products and to our services, right? And the call center, the agents themselves cannot fix handles falling off or bolts coming undone, right? But they get the brunt of it because people call them and say, I bought this crappy suitcase. So now take that feedback and integrate it back into the company. And this is really, everybody who knows me knows I'm a big Deming fan, right? And so the idea is that continuous customer loop back into. And so when we actually listen, our customers, and so the employees are going to be like, instead of having to roll their eyes, and you can tell once, even on a phone call, when someone's rolling their eyes going, yeah, my company's stupid, I'm really sorry, I can't fix this. And they feel helpless, right? Or when a customer is like so angry, right? Because the company's doing things that just don't make sense. You can tell when you call and you give them feedback, and then you can see them actually change. That is what creates the loyalty. Because at the end of the day, when we buy something, we're going to go with a company that we think has our back, that when we do have that whatever you're delivering to us is going to be relatively close to what we thought we bought, or it's going to delight and surprise us and going to be so great that we're going to tell everybody and then we're going to buy more, right? So why would we not buy more if it's that cool or that wonderful? And that's what creates that stickiness. That's what creates that loyalty. So if in this economy you're struggling to create revenue, there is nothing better than AI feedback to understand what the heck is going on in your company, to be able to then just use that as a strategic tool to fix the things that don't make sense. And again, I know it's like this slow down to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found with this company was, because we slowed down in the beginning and we created strategy and we did the mapping and we took out the stuff that didn't make sense, then we added AI, then we tested that to make sure the AI was actually making it better. And in some cases, honestly, in the beginning, it was like clunky and people didn't know how to use it and it had to be tweaked, and we thought the tool would do something, it didn't. And then we had to go back and say, could you do this? And like, there's like iterations, right? But because we did all those steps, now they're like on an exponential flywheel. And for me, like, I'm like, this is it. This is it. This is the possibility, right? And so it's fun for me to see companies really, really, really get it and to measure it, because we're not measuring, then we're just doing magical thinking. And while magical thinking can be really fun and it can feel good, we're not really transforming our businesses. And in this economy, we can't have magical thinking. We really need to know what we're doing.
Yeah. And what role does empathy play in the digital transformation process we are still in and we have not finalized?
I would say we're in the baby steps, right? And so I think we had a hype, like a big hype, right? And now, and there's, in my book, there's a, like the hype cycle. Gartner actually created this curve. And then it's like the curve goes, so it's like, I think on the y-axis is the excitement, right? And so there's all this excitement and everything's going to be great. And it's going to be like, and I'm like, okay, remember I said this, AI is not a toaster.
Uh-huh.
You can't just put the bread in, press the button, and it pops out perfectly with your favorite jam or your favorite peanut butter or chocolate or whatever you like on your toast. So you had a hype cycle, and now we're disappointed, and we're going through this well of despair. And we've gone through this in every single technology revolution, because it takes a minute to understand, what does the technology do? How can it be integrated? And so if you want to get, the left-hand side is also your return on your investment. So if you don't do all these steps, then the timeline, the y-axis or the x-axis is time. So now that disappointment and that low productivity or low results is going to take a really long time. Right. So some people are like, well, we already started and now we got to stop. And I'm like, I know, but you're never going to get out of the well of despair. You're never going to get there without going back and doing these steps. And so, AI is not a toaster. Slow down to go fast.
Werner Seifert, Lothar Seifert. Slow down to get fast. Yeah. Interesting that we have all these business impacts, but there is also another aspect of your life, Natalie, as you have been visiting India, you met the Dalai Lama, and how did this influence your work?
So one of the things I love about him is that he's always been fascinated by science and technology.
Cool.
And we've been back, so we're filming a documentary, and we're looking at what exactly is he saying. And the more time that I got to spend with people in his inner circle and really spend the time with the neuroscientists, what he's basically saying is, here's how the human mind works. We take information in, And based on whether we're in fight or flight or fawn or freeze, we either take that information in or we block it, right? We're like this. And so part of what people think is the touchy-feely part, like the, like, oh, be nice piece, is that when people are scared or threatened or just disappointed or unmotivated, it doesn't matter what tool that you're trying to shove into your company. If people aren't receptive and open, it's not really you're not going to get the business results. And the Dalai Lama says that the mind is like a parachute. It's better when it's open.
Open awareness would be one of the buzzwords.
So what he's done, and he's been doing this for 25 years or more, is he's been measuring the neuroscience of openness, the neuroscience of self-regulation. So when you get new information in, where is your brain state? And if you have some culture that makes people, if you're yelling at your employees or threatening them, or, it's like, I don't know, the old saying they used to say, get on the bus or the bus will run over you, and all that kind of like stuff, it doesn't really motivate people. It actually puts them in a state of fear, and people will freeze. People will fawn. They'll say, oh, absolutely, we'll get that done right away, right? They're quiet quitting. So it puts them in fight or flight or fawn or freeze. And so you can give them the tool, but if they're not open, right? And so part of that is how we treat people, then they're not able to execute. And then the thing about companies is that you have more than one human. And so when two humans get together, now imagine two humans who are operating from freeze or fight or flight, right? And they're not doing well. And then you ask them to co-regulate, you ask them to collaborate or communicate or be a team. It doesn't really work. And so what the Dalai Lama has said is that when we start to really look at how are we self-regulating and how are we co-regulating, that's when you get human performance that's really at the top of its level. So take away the robes, take away this is not about religion. He himself has said to us, our team, because people ask me, well, are you Buddhist now? And I'm like, I'm not thinking about it, because it actually makes a whole lot of sense. And it kind of, I feel better, right? But when you look at it and you start to really understand the neuroscience and the technology behind it, then you're like, oh, that's what he's saying. And it's really, if you're looking at performance management, there is nothing better than truly understanding the neuroscience of performance. And so, like, I'm very honored. So you had asked me when we were in the green room, I thought your film was going to be done. And I thought it was going to be done too. But when we came back from the last trip from Dharamshala, we got to interface with neuroscientist Arthur Brooks from Harvard, Lisa Miller, Dr. Lisa Miller from Columbia, Daniel Goleman, and I got to sit down and chat with them. And what's cool about them is, yes, they're best-selling authors. Yes, they're very charismatic. They also happen to be neuroscientists. And they've spent time with His Holiness. And they understand this aspect of human performance. And like Arthur, his class at Harvard, he's got an undergraduate class. I think it's something about happiness, but it's really about like self-regulation, co-regulation, and top performing capabilities. There's a 400 student wait list.
Oh,
that's, to me, a litmus test. If you can get college students to line up and sign up for a class and be waitlisted, right? They're like, imagine they're like, there's a, like the door and their nose is pressed up against it and they want to get in, right? Yeah. And so when we had talked to the Dalai Lama and his prime minister, people said, I said, do you think that, like, are you guys advocating that people have to convert? And they're like, oh no, No, we don't be, if you're Jewish, be Jewish. If you're Muslim, be Muslim. If you're Catholic, be Catholic. Like, this is not about religion. It's about your human capacity, your mind, your passion, the things that make you light up every single day. That's what we're talking about. And one of the interesting things, because people are saying like, okay, well, so do I have to start chanting now, or do I have to like meditate? And my director, who I love dearly, he's a very empathetic soul, and he's very, very like in tune with everything. Like, I'll start to open my mouth and I'll look up and he's like already shooting something that I'm thinking. So we got that kind of like mind transfer. Our mirror neurons are highly connected. And what I discovered was he's the best him when he's behind the camera. Yes. That's when his you can just see his flow and peak performance come out. And so what we found was, and we verified this with His Holiness, was what he's saying is, find the thing that makes you light up. It could be knitting, could be canning, it could be skydiving, it could be skateboarding. For me, it's writing, right? And talking, right? And having conversations like this. Like, what is that thing that you are really good at, that you love, that fills you up? And do more of that. And when you're doing that, then you move out of the fight or flight or fawn or freeze. And now you're, like, neuroscientifically, you're engaging your prefrontal cortex. You're accessing all your own inner wisdom, your own inner capabilities, and the things that really make you shine. And imagine if you're a leader and you have a whole team of people lit up because they're doing the thing that they love to do. And the cool thing about AI is, if we take out the things that are kind of like, meh, we don't really want to do, and we give people some relief there, now they get to focus on the aspect of what they do where they're really operating at that higher performance level. And we also found with the company that I was working with really closely that people went, you know what, I really don't like my job. Like, I studied to be an accountant and I've been doing accounting, but I would really like to try this.
Yeah.
And so we gave people the ability to try on new things. And so then they were like, oh, wow, this feels so much better. I really like this. And sometimes people, like, I trained, I have a PhD in engineering. So in the beginning of my career, I really liked being in the lab. I liked being on the manufacturing floor. I liked being, I was like working in steel mills, these gigantic, like, seeing the gigantic, it's just awesome. But then as I grew, I was like, oh, I did that, right? And now I want to do something else. And so then I moved into management and team leads, and I think my secret sauce is that I've continuously found new things, and that comes out of the curiosity. And part of that is because I'm not in fight or flight, right? Yeah. So when you're in fight or flight, then you're like, okay, well, I have to keep this job because I have to pay the bills. And so I feel stuck and I don't feel fulfilled. And it's like, give yourself permission to peek around the corner and try something else on for size. And what's been really great about the documentary process, because in some ways it seems like a departure, right? Because how could you be like a technologist in business development and AI and consulting, right? And then you're making a documentary film. But what I found was, because I'm a right brain rocket scientist, so I have this true creative aspect of me. And I have the technical capabilities, but then I also have this other part that really feels fulfilled, and it opens up my heart in a way that the technical stuff didn't. And so when I got to experience that, because I took a sabbatical to do this, in taking that sabbatical, it opened up a part of me that I had really not been giving permission to. I kind of had denied. And so now when I'm bringing that Natalie into the technology piece, now I'm lit up because I got to experience a better me.
Yeah.
Because I was doing something that I loved, that had purpose and soul and passion behind it. And now I can come back and I can say, look at me, look at my smile, look at how happy I am. I want that for you. And
Yeah.
yes, you work in a corporation, but there's an aspect of what you do there that we can light you up. And so let's take a look at that.
Oh, wow. That was one of these wow moments I was looking forward to, Natalie. Thank you for that one.
Yes.
What are the risks of neglecting that power of wow by neglecting empathy in a business strategy? Give us an honest warning.
You're going to keep cutting to the point where you're going to hurt your business.
Yeah.
Cutting there's diminishing returns. And maybe someday, I don't think in my lifetime, we're going to get to the place where there's no humans. As long as we have humans, and it requires humans to do most of the work, right? So and I remember when Sam had said, 95% of all marketing will be done by AI. Here's the thing, even if AI could create the PowerPoint perfectly with no adjustments, the issue inside of a company is, what's the strategy for that PowerPoint? What are we using it for? And someone has to be making all these decisions. And so the tool gives you an output, but the tool doesn't replace how we're using that and integrating it into the business. And it still has to be executed by the humans. And so at least where we are right now in technology, we still have to involve humans. And so pretending like AI is just going to do everything means that you've never really worked in a team in a company.
Yeah.
It's unrealistic. And so can we use AI as a tool? Absolutely, yes. But we need to empower the people so that we create a good experience for them, so they create a good experience for their customers. And I predict, no employees, no customers, no business.
Wow. Clear words. One thing on bridging generational gaps in the workplace. How can empathy help bridging those?
I think one of the best movies, and I'm really big on using movies as an analogy, there was a movie called The Intern. And it was about a young girl who was running a company, and she hired an intern, and the intern ended up being a guy maybe in his 50s or 60s or 70s who was retired.
Robert De Niro.
Yes, Robert De Niro. And so what I found was that the great thing about diversity is that, so the smaller the data set, the more error.
Yeah.
Right? We know that about data. So if you're trying to do something and the fewer data points you collect, the more you don't know that you don't know. So the same thing goes for humans and perspective, because each one of us brings our data, our perspective to the table. And when we add that, so you have experience, you have wisdom, you have, I did that and I fell off the cliff, or I hit my head, or I ran into the mountain, like whatever those things are that you can't get from unless you do it. And then there's the naivety or the new way of thinking, or people who grew up on an app, right? Like I can remember dial phones. I remember the phone with a cord, right? And I couldn't go around the corner very far because the cord wasn't very long, right? So I couldn't, my dad, when I was having phone calls when I was a kid, because I didn't want him, I don't know what we were talking about that I thought was so secret, but anyways. So I think that there's, and it's fascinating because there's so many studies, Scott Page and all these, and they're in the book, all these data points that say when you have multiple perspectives, when you have many perspectives, when you have perspectives that come from opposite ends of the world or point of view, rich, poor, fat, skinny, like everything, you don't know what you don't know, because you cannot be everybody.
Yeah.
And the only way, when you bring an amalgam of points of view together, it's stronger, it's better, and it's more beautiful.
Fantastic. Now, closing and wrapping up as it is on the hour, what is your vision for the future of empathy in business and AI, Natalie?
I hope that people start to understand what empathy is. I hope that we really start to understand the complexity of our minds and how important it is. Another thing that's really fascinating is people have different neurochemistries. And some people don't have their mirror neuron activity part of their brain very well developed. And so if you meet someone who's not very empathetic, it may be that they haven't developed that. And so that is something that can be developed. And I think empathy is also the capacity for complexity, the capacity for patience, and the willingness and giving each other grace to hear each other out and to hear different perspectives, especially when a perspective is very, very, very different from yours.
Yeah.
And part of the discord that we're feeling in the cognitive dissonance is because we're so stuck in fight or flight that we think we have to stick to our opinion because we are coming from survival and the need to be right. And so if we can just relax that a little bit and to be more open and to be more spacious and hear someone else's perspective, I can tell you that I'm a better me when I allow feedback, when I allow people to contribute, when I get to interface with people that are very, very, very different than me. And so I hope that businesses, CEOs out there listening, that you will hear that you need an AI strategy, that you'll hear that you need an empathy strategy, and that you'll hear this is the key to revenue, to profits, to margin.
Natalie, thank you very, very much.
Aww.
That is our CRM convo for today. This hour was a high-speed flyby hour. I enjoyed it very much. To
Thank
our
you.
guests, thanks so much for being with us this week. Thank you, Natalie, for your time and your insights. And I would love to continue that conversation, as there's so much more. We haven't even tipped the tip of the iceberg on what is beneficially coming up in utilizing empathy. Please stay tuned and tune in next week at the same place, same screen. Next week, when we dive into connecting and the connection of EX and CX with our guest Johannes Spille from the Rosen Group. And we look forward to that one. So now we go backstage, and thank you very much. Take care and stay with us for the next conversations coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.